Welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor, a co-founder of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces this weekly talk show. My guest today is a member of a Michigan City Council who has received death threats after asking her board to drop opening prayer.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at ffrf.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
Freethought Matters guest today is Emily Olson, a wife, mother, small business owner, and a new member of the City Council in the town of Owosso, Michigan. In late November, at her first meeting on that council, Emily politely asked the council to reconsider its practice of opening with prayer. And then the fireworks began. So we're going to talk about that today. And thank you so much for joining me today, Emily Olson, and welcome to Freethought Matters.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So before we talk about those fireworks, I've read that one of your favorite quotes is by the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Do you remember that quote?
I do, yes. It's speak your mind even when your voice shakes.
And that's exactly what you did.
That's what I did, and my voice has been shaking for months now. So, but I feel like it runs through everything that I keep saying at these meetings or when I write something. It's just as uncomfortable and awkward as it is. And that's really what it is. It's just socially awkward to say these things. It's not that I'm not without good company. It's just a lot of people will tend to encourage me to be more polite and to just not say words, just, pretend, and nobody will ever know. And I just can't do it. So my voice is shaking a lot.
Well, I'm glad that you are not silenced. And so before we talk about what propelled you to speak your mind as a new member of that city council in Michigan, can you tell me just a little bit more about yourself, why you moved to Owosso, and why you ran to be on the city council?
Sure, absolutely. My husband and I, we've been in Arizona for the last 4 years. He grew up in Eastern Washington, and I grew up in California. And we were sitting in the desert, and it was the middle of COVID, and we fell in love with this house that we saw, this beautiful, romantic 1870s house. And it was in this quaint, charming little town, 15,000 people, and in Michigan. And so we just, on a video tour, decided to take a leap of faith and go for it, and moved ourselves and our young children here. And then I had bought a shop in town intending to bring my business from Arizona over here. And then, of course, like everybody else, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, I was devastated. And I realized that there's this voice in town, this narrative that it's very much conservative and it's very much male dominated, and it's all these things. And I remember tiling my front entry at the shop and crying over Roe versus Wade being overturned, and what that meant, and trying to figure out how everybody I'd met in this town didn't seem to actually fit into this mold that was being described online. And so I just decided—
mold is what?
The mold, the very white, conservative, Christian, male, like dominated, so there's a certain blogger in town who has a fairly robust following, and the messaging is always very clearly slanted in one way. Definitely he challenges all women in any positions of influence or power. He's gone after county commissioners. He's gone after the school board president when she insisted that masks be worn at schools. So this person's consistently agitated women in particular. And so he kind of has this voice in town, which is really frustrating when everybody that I actually meet isn't like that. They tend to be more diverse, more interested in inclusivity and equality, and certainly not religious. That is actually not the majority here in this town, but yet there's this voice that wants you to believe that is. So, I remember just tiling and thinking, okay, well, you know what? If there's this loud voice that's out there saying that it's all one way and it's not, then maybe there needs to just be an equally loud voice that basically just says, show me the proof of that, because I don't believe that it's true. And so a friend of mine that I had made through this she was already a city councilwoman, Janae Fear. And I had asked her how I could support her. Like, what can I do to show up for you? And she said, put yourself on the ballot. So naively, I put myself on the ballot, and then I won. I came in second. So for somebody who really the town didn't know, except for through a women's workshop and then the group that we started, the Fair Mavens, they other than that, basically, I think people wanted to vote for somebody that they didn't know, that wasn't part of this established program.
So I want to talk about Fair Mavens, but now let's talk about that first meeting that you went to as a new council member. And we have some footage of your debut at that meeting where there is clearly some consternation that you did not stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's watch that.
And first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Why didn't you stand up for the pledge?
Contrary to popular opinion from this person, I am not anti-American. That's not why I didn't stand. I just didn't stand because I feel like the insertion of the words under God really tried to, in the 50s, turn something that was meant to be a unifying gesture that people could make to kind of show their support for their country. And I think it tried to turn Christianity into a national identity at the same time. And so because that was added in the 50s, ever since high school, I've always just opted out of saying the Pledge of Allegiance, because while I can't change it, it's not as though I'm in a position where I can unwind that language. I can abstain from it. So that's the best that I can do.
And that is your right and the right of all school children. And certainly there was a good attempt by Mike Newdow to change that, but it looks like we're stuck with it for now. But now I'd like to play video from this public meeting very soon after that, when you pointedly make a request that the council consider dropping this prayer practice, and it kind of goes on to show what happens.
And so I reached out to every member individually of the council to suggest that maybe we would create a much more inclusive city council meeting for people to attend, people that are non-religious, people that have a different religion than the person praying, if we would omit the prayer at the outset, because I just felt like it created a sense of performance that needed to happen in order for people to activate their role in our government, and they just wanted to show up and participate on whatever the issue. So performing a religious ceremony of any kind, I felt, could create a sense of exclusion, of preference, and ultimately potentially bias.
I'm not willing to remove the opening prayer as a mayor.
So I can tell that everybody fervently applauded at the idea of keeping the prayer. And I just question what it is that's lost by making the room more inclusive. Like, where's the harm in allowing the government function, the business, to perform itself? I respect everybody's religion. I just don't know that it belongs at the outset of a government meeting. So I do wonder, in your decision to keep it, where do you find the harm in removing it?
The hard, cold reality is removing it is exclusionary to Christians.
Amen.
There is no way to quantify. You can't say I'm inclusive by excluding a majority of the population.
Right.
That's just absolute backwards from what the meaning of the word is. I myself was raised Christian, have, as I got older, kind of drifted away from it. And to me, on a personal level, it's not that important. But considering, the city that we represent, I mentioned in July that look at the number of churches in this city compared to the number of people. This is a Christian city.
Amen.
So pretty shocking. This is a Christian city. Do you remember what you said in reply to this council member, or what you would say now?
I mean, I think that the biggest issue that I run into with this particular council member, and he's done it multiple times now since then, and he did it, I think, in this setting too, is he presents this argument that says, if you're in somebody else's house, and they want you to take off your shoes, you should take off your shoes and show respect. And it's this strange, it's a shaming is what it's meant to do. It's meant to make you feel like you're being impolite and being rude by not just being quiet and going along. And I think that this argument that he keeps making, I'm not sure that this is how I responded in this instance, but I know that this has been something that's been driving me nuts, is that he presents as though this is our house, Christian's house, right? Like, so this is a public meeting place, but somehow it's meant to, he wants to convey that that I'm in somebody else's house and I should be polite. And what I'm trying to communicate continuously is that this is a city that has a far greater number of non-religious people than it has religious people. And so it's all of our house. There's no one sets the rules except for, the actual people. And 68%, I think, are non-religious. So it's a far overwhelming number. But
And of course, the city government belongs to everybody. It isn't. We aren't a Christian nation, and Owosso can't be a Christian city. So such
That's
a basic
exactly
misunderstanding of the separation of church and state. But isn't it correct that at the next city council meeting, they kind of devoted, the townspeople showed up to then speak against you?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So the first meeting was, I tipped him off because I had asked this question in advance of, is there anybody, you can't, sorry, just to back up, but we pick the mayor. So we're a city that essentially the city council votes amongst the 7 city council members who's going to be mayor. And so the first meeting, I had reached out to everybody because the decision to utilize a prayer at the beginning of the meeting is at the sole discretion of the mayor. So although in this instance we voted, that was his decision. He didn't really want to shoulder the weight of saying no, said, just outright. So he decided to put it to a vote. But ordinarily, the mayor decides unilaterally whether or not there is going to be or is not going to be a prayer. And the mayors here have always apparently said there was going to be a prayer. So the first meeting, people showed up because I had emailed out and said, is there anybody that's running for that wants to be mayor that also would consider omitting this in lieu of, more greater inclusivity? And so people showed up for that one. And then when they saw that I had sat down for the Pledge of Allegiance as well, then there's a whole nother group that came out for the second one. So they had gotten, the American Legion involved and the VFW. And so there was several uniformed, veterans that were there. And I think that once again, the idea was to shame me, to declare that I was anti-veteran, anti-everything. And of course I stayed and I spoke to people afterwards and I expressed my gratitude and my family. I have veterans in my family. So I was trying to explain, it's a complicated stance, but it's my stance. It's the best that I can do because I just don't believe that those 2 words belong in there. And I think somebody tinkered with us and tried to it was I think about all those bills that get through Congress and how the last minute slipped it right in. And I feel like that's kind of the under God in the pledge. It's they already had everybody agreeing to it and then they just slide it right in.
Yeah, that was in 1954, and whole generations grew up saying the secular pledge, of course. So I think you're very courageous. I'm talking with Emily Olson, who's on the City Council in Owosso, Michigan. And when we come back from the break, Emily, I want to ask you about this very concerning death threat that you received and what happened after that.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed, as you may be, by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
My name is Gabrielle Hinahara, and I'm an atheist because I believe in the power of doing good for the sake of doing good, and not because some divine entity tells you what is good and what's not, and not because you think it will get you into some sort of heavenly afterlife. I believe in human morality, which is why I think that most cultures across the world have come to the kind of same basic principles and values, such as the Golden Rule, which isn't based in religion, but is based in human interactions and mutual respect. And I think a lot of people turn to religion because it makes the choice of morality really easy, black and white, right and wrong, and you don't have to decide which is which. And in my experience as being an atheist through my life, I've found that moral choices are something that I think about a lot more than a lot of other people because nobody's telling me the answer. And since I don't believe in an afterlife, pretty much my whole meaning in life is based on my interactions with other people and that I can leave this world a better place by my actions.
I'm talking with new City Council member Emily Olson from Owosso, Michigan, about what's wrong with governmental prayer, why she has asked to drop it at her City Council meetings, and the death threat that she received. And it was very detailed, wasn't it, Emily?
It was. It was a very layered threat. It was unusual. It was that same blogger who comes to every City Council meeting and pretends that he's a journalist, and so he wants to have press credentials, but the city won't give them to him. And he speaks at every opportunity to have the citizen comments. And that man basically had slipped it onto my section of the dais. He had put the note there. And so I hadn't read it during the meeting because when I opened it, it looked like it was going to be, it started with God forgives you and God's sorry. And I was like, okay, this is too much for right now. So I put it away and I took it with me. And then I read it later in the evening with a couple of friends when we went out to get dinner afterwards. And pretty quickly I was like blown away because it details in there exactly that God had given him a vision, and that although he really doesn't like me, he now has to protect me. And so part of that is giving me this warning about how a man that matches his description is going to shoot me at the back door of my business on, some night in winter, and then will leave in a car that's exactly like his car. It's a very complicated death threat. And when I read it, obviously I was alarmed. And so I called the director of public safety, and he immediately took it very seriously too. And so I thought that there was going to be traction. I was very afraid. I've got 4 little kids here, and so it's just, it's upsetting. He had gone after kind of people in the past, but when it turns out that when I followed it through and I tried to get the PPO, personal protection order, against him for essentially threatening me, the judge didn't sign off on it, said that I had to have been threatened by the man twice in order for it to count.
Wow. And
Yeah.
you did mention to me earlier before the show that his brother became kind of nationally famous during COVID.
Yeah, because he was protesting the shutdowns during COVID. So he's a barber here in town. He became, I believe, kind of colloquially known as the America's barber, essentially. His name was Carl Mankey. And this man, Tom Mankey, is the one who basically rose to stardom via his brother's antics, I guess, during COVID.
So you moved to Owosso, I think, in May 2021. And besides starting a new business right off the bat and running for office, you also started a group for progressive women. And what is that group called? And I think you have it on your T-shirt. And what you do?
I do, yes. The Fair Mavens. Basically, we were aiming for a progressive women's group because I had been told, especially during Pride, we had some protests here, and during Pride, we had a lot of religious groups that came out of the woodwork because our farmers market basically like supported the Pride committee during the, allowed them to kind of participate and have a table. And so we ended up with this really unusual kind of extreme religious group that would stand at the corners of the farmers market with their bullhorns and scream out that people in the market were pedophiles and people, don't support the business. It was very intense. So June was a rough month for our little town because we got this crazy religious faction that basically descended on the farmers market. And so our poor farmers market owners, they just shouldered the lion's share of all of this positivity and energy, and we had an amazing Pride celebration in the end, but there was, it was through the mud of these other voices that were trying to scream down the town. And so the Fair Mavens became kind of an effort to find all the women that were being told that they were here. It was communicated to me that everybody's here. They're just hiding. They're just hanging out. They'll vote on the polls, but they're not necessarily making themselves known. And I just kind of felt like, again, with that whole, if there's one loud voice in town, then people are going to believe that that's the only voice. And so we need to give another option. So the Fair Mavens basically was born from that. And we meet once a month. And it's just this amazing group of women that are really coming out of their shell. And the town is getting a better sense of who they are. In fact, with our city council meetings, that's kind of, they keep showing up, these Fair Mavens, they keep showing up, every other week for the city council meetings. And basically, I think the general gist of what everybody's trying to do is, if the city council believes that the town is made up of one particular type of person, then it's our duty to introduce ourselves to them and to let the whole town everybody just needs to keep showing up and introducing, so that way they have a greater understanding of how diverse our town actually is, because they're just not seeing it.
Well, it almost sounds as if a couple of people in town, or those in power in town, are really promoting Christian nationalism.
Very much so. Yes, absolutely. Well, that's the lens in which they see their world. So it's a comfortable and a historied position to think that that's what should be essentially at the top of every town's structure.
So Emily, why does separation of church and state matter?
Well, I think in this instance it matters especially to avoid prejudice and to avoid the perceived notion that any one person is favored over another. And this is playing out exactly like this in real time. I chose to abstain from the prayer and the pledge, and it was brought immediately from a council member to that blogger. And did you see that she didn't stand? And I was just a resident at that time. So if it's not if it could happen, it did happen. It's playing itself out right now. And so the notion that a city council should assemble, and anyone in the audience that doesn't subscribe to this, rise and pray moment is noted.
Well, you're showing a roadmap for other people who live in areas like this, especially smaller towns, about what they can do to fight Christian nationalism and fight this idea that there's this monolithic voice in their community. So good for you. Now, Emily, it is very unusual for any member of a governmental body to challenge governmental prayer, probably because they fear the kind of reaction that you got. But you're still fighting, you're still feisty. Any advice for other people who are on governmental bodies, and why do you feel it's so important to stand up for the separation between religion and government?
Well, certainly, I think that I've tried to unpack this myself and wonder why I can't just go along and get along, because obviously life would be much easier. I think I mentioned to you off that we get paid a whopping $10 for every one of these meetings. So in exchange for $10, I get about 400 pages worth of documents that I get to review and budgets that I get to look through and make sure that I'm signing off for the city's best interest on all of these matters. And then on top of which I get the death threats for free. So it's really working out great for me. But I do try to figure out what is my motivation for staying with this issue. And I think that on a local level, the best thing about this is that I'm looking at high schoolers that are coming to our group, and high schoolers and people that in general that are looking at their government as like a place where they can explore these crazy topics, right? It shouldn't be just fact that, it's one way and you can't challenge it Like, we have these rights, we have these freedoms. Let's stretch our legs a little bit. Let's see where the boundaries are. Let's open a conversation and see how people respond. So I think on a local level, it's really exciting because you can have these big aha moments where people are, it's not so big that you don't know the person that you're talking to, but yet it's still unnerving to challenge the status quo, but it's safer to do so because you do know the person and you go to their coffee shop and you go to their store, or, your kids play together. So there's a little bit more security. I mean, I'm new to the town, so clearly I have a little less of that security. I got the death threats, but I think anybody else that maybe is from a town should be able to feel confident knowing that they can explore conversation and really just try to stretch the assumptions, right?
I know that you're working at the local level, but do you think you might like to run for a higher office someday? Because we can use someone like you.
I mean, it would be fantastic, but I just don't know that I've got the bandwidth for it. I've actually cried a lot over these things. I worry about, I worry about somebody taking it too far. That the guy's letter was unnerving, mainly because it felt like it was somebody describing a psychotic break, and so that becomes kind of like a, I don't know. You just don't know what you're getting, and so I look at AOC and I look at all these amazing politicians, and I think, God, they must get like hundreds of death threats, and how do they just keep on keeping on? But so I don't know. I don't think so.
Thank you so much for standing up. I'm so sorry that you would have had that experience, but what you're doing is so important to educate and enlighten other people that state-church separation is important, and there are plenty of freethinkers in every community who do not like being prayed at by their city council.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Emily Olson.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, viewers, for watching Freethought Matters, because Freethought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.